Welcome back to the Expensive Coins History channel. Take a slow look at the coins sitting in your drawer, your old toolbox, the glass jar in the kitchen, or that forgotten box in the closet. Most people see spare change. Most people see pocket money. But serious collectors, especially men between 35 and 65 who understand patience, timing, and opportunity, see something very different. They see possibility. The first coin in this story is small, thin, easy to ignore. The 1972 D1 dime, 10 cents. That's all it says on the surface. And that is exactly why so many people overlooked it for decades. In 1972, America was navigating a complicated economic moment. Inflation pressures were building. The U.S. had recently left the gold standard. Confidence in currency was shifting. But everyday life continued. Millions of dimes were struck at the Denver Mint that year. They were meant to circulate, to move quickly through hands, cash registers, vending machines, gas stations. No one thought they would become anything special. But history doesn't announce itself when it happens. It whispers. The 1972 D-dime was produced in massive quantities. On paper, it should be common. But here is where experienced collectors lean forward and pay attention. When a coin is produced in high volume, quality control becomes a challenge. Dies wear down. Alignment shifts. Pressure changes. Small variations begin to appear. And variations are where value lives. Over time, sharp-eyed collectors started noticing something unusual in certain 1972 D-dimes. Strike anomalies. Rarity characteristics. Exceptional mint state preservation. Coins that somehow escaped circulation entirely. Coins that retained razor-sharp details in Roosevelt's hair, crisp torch lines on the reverse, and flawless fields untouched by the chaos of daily commerce. Most dimes from 1972 are worth face value. Let's be clear about that. But we are not talking about ordinary coins. We are talking about the kind that makes experienced numismatists pause. When a coin survives more than 50 years in pristine condition, graded at the highest levels, it becomes more than spare change. It becomes a time capsule, a frozen moment from the early 1970s, preserved in metal. Men between 35 and 65 understand this instinctively. They understand tools that were built better decades ago. They understand classic cars that were once just transportation. They understand that time transforms ordinary objects into assets. The 1972 D-dime, in rare top-graded condition, represents that transformation. Now imagine this scenario. In 1972, someone receives a roll of fresh dimes from a bank in Denver. They set a few aside. Maybe they liked collecting. Maybe they just forgot them in a drawer. The decades pass. Inflation rises. Presidents change. Technology transforms the world. That small silver-colored coin sits quietly, unnoticed, uncelebrated, until one day it is examined under magnification. The surfaces are flawless. The luster is undisturbed. The strike is strong and full. It earns an elite grade. And suddenly, what was once 10 cents becomes something entirely different. Because collectors compete for perfection. And perfection is rare. Condition is everything in the coin market. Two identical coins from the same year and mint can have wildly different values depending on preservation. A circulated 1972 D-dime might buy you nothing more than 10 cents worth of gum. But a top-tier mint state example with exceptional strike and eye appeal becomes a prize. Why? Because serious collectors don't collect just dates. They collect the best of each date. Registry sets have intensified this competition. Collectors building top-ranked Roosevelt dime sets need the highest graded examples available. When population reports show only a handful at the top grade, demand intensifies. Auctions become battles. Prices escalate quickly. This is where ordinary people get shocked. How can a dime be worth that much? The answer is simple. Rarity is not always about how many were made. It is about how many survived in elite condition. The 1972 D-dime had a large mintage. But ultra-high-grade survivors are scarce. Extremely scarce. Especially those with booming luster, no contact marks, full details, and strong eye appeal. And here is another factor experienced investors understand. Supply cannot increase. No more 1972 D-dimes will ever be minted. What exists today is all that will ever exist. Every year, more are damaged, lost, or mishandled. The number of pristine examples does not grow. It shrinks. That creates pressure. Long-term pressure. For decades, the 1972 dime sat quietly in collections. But as the coin market matured and third-party grading standardized quality, the true scarcity at the highest levels became visible. Population reports revealed just how few top-tier coins existed. And that is when serious money entered the room. Auction records began to surprise people. Strong examples brought strong premiums. Elite examples brought astonishing numbers. If you are watching this right now, ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you checked your dimes carefully? Not glanced at them. Checked them. Examined the mint mark. Looked for the small d below the date. Studied the surfaces under light. Considered the possibility that something ordinary might not be so ordinary after all. Most people never do. That is why opportunity survives. The 1972 D dime represents a broader lesson. Value often hides in plain sight. It hides in items that people assume are too common to matter. It hides in objects dismissed because they are small. 10 cents is small. But history is not. The early 1970s were a pivotal era. Economic transition, political tension, monetary policy shifts. Coins from that period are physical artifacts of a changing America. And when preserved at the highest levels, they become tangible links to that transformation. Collectors in the 35 to 65 age group often feel this deeply. They remember stories from their parents about the 70s. They remember the shift from silver coins. They understand that money itself has changed. Holding a 1972 D dime in flawless condition is like holding a preserved fragment of that era. And when two determined collectors both need that same coin to complete a top registry set, logic gives way to competition. That is how prices climb. That is how a 10-cent coin evolves into a headline. Today, exceptional examples of the 1972 D1 dime have reached staggering levels at auction when graded at the very highest tier, with outstanding strike and preservation. The number that once would have sounded impossible now commands attention. Up to $151,000 for the finest known examples in elite condition. Let that sink in. 10 cents. Transformed by time, preservation, rarity, and demand into $151,000. That is not luck. That is the power of condition rarity combined with long-term collector competition. So before you dismiss the coins in your possession, before you assume that small means insignificant, remember this story. Because sometimes the smallest coin carries the largest surprise. Now let's move to the second coin. The 1995 D Washington quarter dollar. At first glance, this coin feels too modern to matter. Many men between 35 and 65 remember 1995 clearly. It doesn't feel like history. It feels recent. Gas was cheaper. The internet was just starting to grow. Most people were focused on careers, families, mortgages, responsibilities. And quarters, they were for parking meters, vending machines, toll booths. Nothing special. That assumption is exactly why this coin deserves attention. In 1995, the Denver Mint produced millions of Washington quarters. They entered circulation immediately. They were used, dropped, scratched, stacked, tossed into jars, and rolled at banks. Most lived hard lives. Contact marks from counting machines. Scratches from other coins. Weak strikes from high-speed production. Mass production does not mean mass perfection. Here is something most casual collectors never fully understand. Modern coins can be extremely difficult to find in flawless condition. Why? Because the higher the production speed, the more likely small imperfections appear. Dies wear quickly. Planchets pick up marks. Coins hit each other during packaging. Even before leaving the mint, many coins already show minor flaws. To the average person, those flaws don't matter. To elite collectors, they matter deeply. The 1995 D Washington quarter becomes interesting when we talk about top-tier grading. Not average mint state. Not lightly circulated. We are talking about the absolute highest certified grades with exceptional eye appeal. Coins with full luster. Strong strikes. Clean fields. Minimal contact marks. Balanced color. Perfect rims. In the world of registry competition, these details are everything. Think about it this way. There are collectors who dedicate years to building the finest Washington quarter set possible. They want every date, every mint mark. But not just any example. They want the highest graded example available. If a particular date has only a handful of coins graded at the top level, competition intensifies. The 1995 D quarter falls into that category at the extreme high end. Most examples are common. But perfection is rare, and rarity at the top drives price. Imagine two seasoned collectors, both financially comfortable, both determined, both competing in registry rankings. They see that only a very limited number of 1995 D quarters exist in the highest certified grade. One appears at auction. They both need it. This is where psychology meets scarcity. The bidding starts normally, climbs steadily, then pride enters the equation. So does status. Registry rankings are public. Owning the finest example is not just about money. It's about achievement. It's about being number one. That competitive edge is something many men understand instinctively. The desire to win, the desire to secure the best, the willingness to pay more when the prize is rare enough. And when that competition unfolds in a live auction environment, numbers escalate fast. But there is another factor here. Modern coins were not widely saved in pristine condition the way earlier coins sometimes were. In the 1950s and 60s, collectors often stored rolls carefully. By the 1990s, casual saving habits had declined. Coins were used, not preserved. So while millions were made, very few survived in flawless condition. Add to that the importance of strike quality. Some 1995 D quarters show weak details in Washington's hair or the eagle's feathers. Strong, fully struck examples are harder to locate. Combine that with pristine surfaces and the number narrows dramatically. This is how common coins become condition rarities. And condition rarity is one of the most powerful forces in modern numismatics. If you're watching this and thinking, I've seen 1995 quarters before, you're absolutely right, but have you seen one under magnification? Have you tilted it under light to see if the luster flows uninterrupted? Have you examined the fields for tiny contact marks? Most people never look that closely. That's why extraordinary examples remain hidden for years. There are stories of individuals who opened old bank rolls decades later and found near-perfect coins inside. Coins that had never truly circulated. Coins that, once graded, shocked everyone. It only takes 1.1 elite specimen 0.1 coin that meets the strictest grading standards. Because grading at the highest levels is unforgiving. The difference between near-perfect and perfect can mean tens of thousands of dollars. A tiny tick on the cheek, a faint mark near the rim, that's enough to drop the grade. And that's why true top-tier coins are so scarce. Now consider the timeline point 1995 to today. Over 30 years. In that time, countless quarters have been lost, damaged, melted, worn, or mishandled. The population of untouched examples has not grown. It has quietly decreased. As registry competition expanded in the 2000s and 2010s, demand for high-grade modern coins surged. Collectors began revisiting dates that were once ignored. Auction houses started highlighting condition rarities, and the 1995 D Washington quarter, in the highest known grade, stepped into the spotlight. When one of the finest known examples crossed the auction block, the results stunned casual observers. Because on the surface it was just a quarter. But in reality, it was one of the best surviving examples of its kind. That distinction matters. Value in collectibles is often misunderstood. It is not about what something is worth to everyone. It is about what it is worth to the one person who must have it. When supply is extremely limited at the top level, that one determined buyer can change everything. And that is exactly what happened. The 1995 D Washington quarter dollar, in its finest certified condition, reached a remarkable value. Up to $47,000, $47,000 for a coin most people would spend without a second thought. Let that number settle in. Because it forces a new question. What else have we overlooked? Before you dismiss modern coins as too new to matter, remember this story. Remember that perfection is rare. Remember that condition can transform ordinary metal into a competitive trophy. And most importantly, remember that the coins sitting in your possession right now might deserve a closer look. We're just getting started. Now we move into something even more interesting. The 1970 D Washington quarter dollar. This coin comes from a different era. A time when America was shifting rapidly. The late 1960s had just ended. The country was facing economic adjustments, cultural changes, and the continued impact of the Coinage Act of 1965, which had already removed silver from circulating dimes and quarters. BY 1970, the Washington quarter was no longer silver. It was clad, copper-nickel layered over a copper core. To many people at the time, that change symbolized something deeper. The end of one era, the beginning of another. Collectors were still adjusting. Now here's where the story becomes powerful. In 1970, the Denver Mint produced millions of Washington quarters. On paper, nothing seems unusual. The mintage numbers don't immediately suggest extreme rarity. And because the coin wasn't silver, many people didn't bother saving rolls in large quantities like they had with earlier silver issues. That decision quietly shaped the future. When people assume something isn't worth saving, survival rates drop dramatically. Most 1970 quarters entered circulation immediately. They were used in grocery stores, gas stations, vending machines, arcades. They bounced around pockets. They were stacked in bank rolls and fed through counting machines. Clad coins mark easily. Tiny contact marks appear fast. Bag marks accumulate during transport. Weak strikes develop as dies wear. Finding an average 1970 quarter today is easy. Finding a flawless one is not. And that is where serious collectors begin to pay attention. Men between 35 and 65 understand something critical about markets. Value often hides behind assumption. When the majority dismisses something, the minority that pays attention gains advantage. For years, the 1970 Washington quarter was viewed as just another modern clad coin. It didn't carry silver. It wasn't ancient. It wasn't exotic. But then grading services began revealing population data. And the numbers at the highest grade levels were shockingly small. Not small in total mintage. Small in perfection. Coins graded at the absolute top, virtually flawless surfaces, razor-sharp strike, booming luster, were extremely limited. And when you combine limited supply with competitive demand, pressure builds. Let's talk about strike quality. Many 1970 quarters show softer details, especially in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. A fully struck example with bold definition is already harder to find. Now add pristine surfaces. No distracting contact marks. No scuffs in the fields. No rim dings. That narrows the field dramatically. The difference between a near-perfect coin and a perfect coin can be microscopic. A tiny tick under magnification can drop a grade. And when only a handful exist at the very top level, those coins become trophies. Registry collectors compete fiercely for top spots. They don't want average. They want the best-known example. Imagine two established collectors, both financially secure, both building top-ranked Washington quarter sets. One slot remains at the highest grade for 1970. Only a few coins qualify. When one appears at auction, it's no longer about 25 cents. It's about prestige. It's about ranking. It's about owning one of the finest surviving examples from that year. This is where price accelerates. Because no new 1970 quarters will ever be minted. The supply is fixed forever. And as time passes, pristine examples become even harder to locate. Think about the journey of a typical quarter. Dropped on concrete. Scraped across counters. Stored loosely in jars. Counted in machines, handled carelessly. Perfection rarely survives that journey. That's why when a coin surfaces that somehow avoided all of that, untouched luster, immaculate surfaces, it commands respect. Now consider the timeline again. 1970 was over 5 decades ago. In that time, how many 1970 quarters have been damaged, lost, or worn down? The population of flawless examples does not increase. It only shrinks. And as more collectors enter the registry competition space, demand grows. There's also a psychological factor here. Coins from 1970 feel older than 1995. They connect to a different generation, a different America. For men in the 35 to 65 range, 1970 represents either early childhood memories or stories from parents. That connection adds emotional weight. Collectors don't just buy metal. They buy connection. They buy memory. They buy status. When one of the finest certified examples of the 1970 Washington quarter appeared in the market, it shocked observers. Because most people still saw it as common. But collectors saw what mattered: condition scarcity, limited top population, high registry demand. fixed supply, and the result, a number that forced people to reconsider everything they thought they knew about common coins. The 1970 Washington quarter, in elite top-tier condition, reached values up to $70,000 for a coin with a face value of 25 cents. Pause and think about that transformation. 25 cents. Ignored. Spent. Forgotten. Converted by preservation and competition into $70,000. This is why serious collectors examine every detail. This is why experienced investors understand scarcity beyond surface-level mintage numbers. Because sometimes the rarest thing is not the coin itself, it's the condition. And that lesson carries forward into the next coin in this list. Now we step into a coin that feels more modern, more familiar, and yet far more dangerous to ignore. The 2000 P1. At the turn of the millennium, America was standing on the edge of a new era. Y2K fears were fading. Technology was accelerating. The new century carried optimism, uncertainty, ambition. And the United States Mint introduced a new dollar coin. The Sacagawea dollar. Golden in color. Different from the Susan B. Anthony dollar. Designed to feel bold, symbolic, forward-looking. The Philadelphia Mint struck millions of them in the year 2000. They were meant to circulate heavily. They were meant to replace the paper dollar over time. But something unexpected happened. The public didn't fully embrace it. Most of these coins ended up sitting in storage, in vaults, in bank rolls, in drawers, in collections. Many never truly circulated the way the mint intended. On the surface, that sounds like it should reduce rarity. But here is where the story becomes powerful. When a coin is produced in high quantity and stored carelessly, quality becomes inconsistent. Many 2000 P dollars were stacked, transported, and stored in large bags. Contact marks appeared. Surface abrasions formed. Minor scratches developed before the coins even left government storage. So while millions exist, pristine examples are surprisingly scarce at the very highest grade levels. Now let's go deeper. In 2000, a special group of Sacagawea dollars was produced with enhanced detail. Some were struck differently. Some have subtle die variations. Some exhibit stronger feather detail in the eagle. Some display smoother fields and sharper strike characteristics. These subtle differences matter greatly in the high-end collector market. But condition still rules everything. A typical 2000 P dollar might look shiny to the untrained eye. But under magnification, flaws appear. Tiny contact marks. Slight dulling of luster. Imperfections on Sacagawea's cheek. Small hits along the RIM.to the grading scale, those imperfections are decisive. The difference between a very high grade and a perfect grade can mean tens of thousands of dollars. Men between 35 and 65 understand grading standards instinctively if they've ever dealt in cars, watches, firearms, or collectibles. A small flaw can drastically change price. A scratch on a classic car lowers value. A blemish on a luxury watch matters. Coins are no different. Now imagine a collector building the finest modern dollar registry set in the country. Every date, every mint, every top grade, and then they look at the 2000 P slot. Only a tiny number exists at the absolute highest certified grade. The competition begins quietly. Then one of the finest known examples hits auction. This is where the psychology shifts. The 2000 P dollar is symbolic. It represents the beginning of a new millennium. It carries historical meaning beyond its face value. It marks a transition point in U.S. coinage design. Collectors recognize symbolic importance. And when symbolic importance meets condition rarity, value multiplies. Another critical factor, population stagnation. Grading services publish how many coins have achieved each grade. When collectors see extremely low numbers at the top, they understand something immediately. This isn't about how many were minted, it's about how many survived untouched. And survival at perfection is rare. The Sacagawea dollar design is detailed. Detailed designs are harder to strike perfectly. High points show marks easily. The smooth fields show abrasions quickly. Golden-colored surfaces reveal contact marks more clearly than darker coins, so perfection becomes even harder to achieve. Now imagine two determined buyers in a high-profile auction, both building elite modern collections, both aware that only a handful of 2000 P dollars exist at this highest grade. 1 coin. 1 opportunity. Because if you lose it, you may wait years for another. And even then, there's no guarantee one will appear. That pressure drives bidding. The opening bids are calm, analytical, strategic. Then the increments rise faster. It becomes about securing something irreplaceable. For the average person, it's still just $1. For the collector, it's a cornerstone, that it's a defining piece in a competitive registry set, that it's proof of patience and commitment. And when the hammer falls, the number shocks casual observers, because perception lags reality. Most people still believe modern coins cannot carry major value. But condition rarity destroys that assumption. The 2000 $1, in elite top-tier certified condition, has reached astonishing auction heights. Up to $78,000. For a coin most Americans once received as change. Pause for a moment. Think about how many times you've handled dollar coins casually, tossed them into a drawer, ignored them in a jar. How many people examined them closely? How many people protected them from contact? Very few. That's why the finest examples command extraordinary premiums. Scarcity is not always about AG. It is about survival in exceptional state. And the 2000 $1 proves that even a coin from the year 2000 can become a five-figure asset when preservation meets demand. We have one more coin left. And this final one carries weight, literally and historically. Now we arrive at the final coin. And this one carries presence, weight, history. The 1971 half dollar. When you hold a half dollar, it feels different. Heavier than a quarter. Wider. More substantial. There's something about it that commands attention. Even men who don't collect coins tend to pause for a second when they hold a half dollar. It feels important. In 1971, the Kennedy half dollar was still relatively young. Introduced in 1964 after President John F. Kennedy's assassination, the coin had quickly become both a circulating piece and a symbol. Early versions were silver. But by 1971, the silver content had been removed for circulation strikes. The 1971 half dollar from the Denver Mint was clad. And just like the other coins we've discussed, millions were produced. On paper, nothing screams rarity. But paper doesn't tell the full story. By 1971, public interest in saving half dollars had already cooled compared to 1964 to 1967. Many people no longer hoarded them in large numbers. They circulated more freely. They were used in casinos, banks, retail stores. They experienced heavy contact. Half dollars are large coins. Large surfaces mean larger exposure to marks. Bag marks show easily. Contact abrasions appear quickly. The wide fields near Kennedy's portrait are especially vulnerable. Finding an average 1971 half dollar today is simple. Finding a flawless one is a different matter entirely. The Denver Mint in 1971 faced typical high-speed production pressures. Dies wore down. Strikes varied. Some coins show weaker detail in Kennedy's hair. Others display light planchet imperfections. Many exhibit small hits from transport and storage. Now think carefully about grading standards. A large coin with broad surfaces has more area where flaws can appear. Under magnification, tiny imperfections become significant. A single mark on Kennedy's cheek can be the difference between an elite grade and a merely high grade. And that difference can mean tens of thousands of dollars. For years, the 1971 half dollar was largely ignored at the high-end registry level. It was considered modern, clad, not silver, not rare by mintage. But then collectors started analyzing population data. And something became clear. The absolute highest certified grades, the number of surviving examples was shockingly low. Why? Because very few people in 1971 were carefully preserving Denver minted half dollars in flawless condition. Most were used. Many were mishandled. Some were stored loosely in bags for decades. Condition rarity quietly developed. Men between 35 and 65 understand delayed recognition. Sometimes an asset sits undervalued for years. Then awareness grows. Then demand builds. Then prices adjust rapidly. That's exactly what happened here. The Kennedy half dollar carries emotional power, connects to American history, to a moment of national tragedy, to a generation that remembers where they were in 1963. Even though 1971 versions were no longer silver, the symbolism remains strong. Collectors building top-tier Kennedy half dollar registry sets need the best example from every year in mint. When they reach 1971, they encounter a bottleneck at the highest grade. Very few coins qualify. Now imagine a major auction. A top population 1971 D half-dollar appears. Certified at an elite grade. Full luster blazing across the surfaces. Strong strike. Minimal marks. Exceptional eye appeal. Point 2. Advanced collectors are watching closely. They both need it. Not want it. Need it. Because without it, their registry set cannot reach number 1. The bidding starts. It moves steadily. Then it accelerates. Because they both know something critical. There may not be another opportunity like this for years, and even if another appears, it might not be as strong. This is how competition transforms perception. A coin most people see as 50 cents becomes a battlefield of determination and status. And when the hammer falls, the result stuns observers. The 1971 D half-dollar, in the finest certified condition known, has reached extraordinary heights. Up to $115,000.115,000. For a clad half-dollar from 1971. Let that settle in. 50 cents. Ignored for decades. Transformed by preservation, scarcity at the highest grade, registry competition, and historical symbolism into a six-figure asset. Now step back and look at the full picture. 5. Coins. 5 denominations most people spend without hesitation: a dime, a quarter. Another quarter, a dollar, a half-dollar. Together, at their highest known elite condition values, they represent something almost unbelievable. $151, $000.47, $000.70, $000.78, $000.115, $000. These aren't numbers pulled from fantasy. They are the result of condition rarity meeting serious demand. And here is the deeper message for the serious viewer. The market rewards patience. The market rewards knowledge. The market rewards those who look closer when others look away. Most people will never examine their change. Most people will never understand grading scales. Most people will assume that if millions were minted, nothing could be valuable. But you are not most people. If you are still watching at this point, you understand something critical. Opportunity does not shout. It sits quietly. In drawers. In jars. In old bankrolls. In inherited collections. In forgotten boxes. The difference between face value and five-figure value is often a matter of condition, awareness, and timing. So the next time you see a 1972 D dime, a 1995 D quarter, a 1970 D quarter, a 2000 P dollar, or a 1971 D half-dollar, don't just glance at it. Study it. Check the mint mark. Examine the surfaces. Respect the possibility, because history has already proven something powerful. Even the most ordinary-looking coin can become extraordinary. And sometimes, the difference between pocket change and life-changing money is simply the willingness to look twice.